good. All right. Welcome everyone to the Cottonwood Heights Planning Commission meeting for July 6th, 2022. Thank you all for coming out to participate in the meeting. We'll start with if there's any, well, first of all, I'll mention it's a hybrid participation from the Planning Commission. We do have Commissioner Ebler on Zoom, and Commissioner Ebler, just want to make sure we can hear you okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep, that's working. All right, thank you. So we do have 4 Planning Commission members here with Commissioner Ebler on Zoom. Are there any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest to disclose? No.
No.
Okay. All right, then we will start with general public comment for tonight. General public comment is a time where anyone from the public is given 3 minutes to talk about something that's not on the agenda. So if you're here tonight to talk about the business item on the agenda, which is the sensitive lands ordinance, then we'll wait to hear that comment when that comes up for public comment. But if you're here tonight to talk about anything outside of that item, you're welcome to either submit a card or raise your hand. And we'll give you the 3 minutes to provide that comment. So I've got 6 cards here tonight. Would you mind raising your hand if you've submitted a card that is for general public comment? Okay. Both? All right. And are you Chris or Ed? I was just guessing. I mean, I had a 15% chance. All right, then Ed, do you want to go ahead and approach that? And just state your name.
Okay, can you hear me? My name's Ed Promozic. My wife and I live in Cottonwood Heights. We've lived here for 10 years and we love it. And if she were here, she'd tell you were wise to limit the comment to 3 minutes, because whenever I get the mic, she says, "Oh, Lord." Anyway, I'll read a little bit. Part of it had to do with the sensitive lands, but I have some questions regardless. I'd like to make a few comments and ask questions, primarily regarding the large parcel of land surrounding and adjacent to the old mill primarily. For a couple years now, we've been hearing a lot of rumors about what might happen on a proposed development of that area, and I'd like to gain a little clarity if it's possible. I'd also like to see Big Cottonwood Canyon Road designated as a historic roadway. I don't know what the process is, but I think it would be really nice. That strip of road between 3000 East and Fort Union Boulevard represents the last rural feeling of a road along the east side, much like Old Danish Road. Should there be significant development of any kind, and certainly commercial, this will be lost forever. I am scared to death personally that Cottonwood Heights could possibly end up like Sugar House, which to me is a complete disaster. We have one shot at sensible land use and development. Let us not squander it, please. Okay, now one question or statement I have. I reviewed today the future land use map of Cottonwood Heights. Most of the land I believe to be owned or controlled by the Walker family appears to be designated as mixed use, but I'm a little confused. The current zoning indicates it's zoned F121, Foothill Recreational. I don't expect anybody to give me these answers tonight, but I'd like to get it in the record that I'd like some clarity on what that does going forward. There appears to be one parcel adjacent to this land, east of Big Cottonwood Creek, owned or controlled by Kent Palmer. This parcel is currently zoned R18. The future land use map indicates residential low density. I would strongly recommend planning zoning to maintain those current designations regarding that parcel, and urge planning and zoning to consider luxury housing on the Walker parcel, which would be typical for the area, Old Mill Estates, Canyon Creek Circle and such. Question 2 I have, would the underground aquifer on the Walker parcel affect development in any way? Meaning, would you be able to build on top of it, or does it have to be ignored. That's something I guess that I could get emailed responses on later or come in and talk to someone. In closing, I'm not anti-development. Okay. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to voice my concerns, and thanks to all very much.
Thank you, Ed. So a couple of thoughts. The next planning commission meeting, which will be held on July 19th, 20th, is going to be a joint planning commission meeting with the city council where we are going to be going through the general plan. And so I think I'm not clear on if there's going to be public comment that night, but there will be a joint working session if you want to listen in on that meeting.
If you left your contact info, we'll follow up. Staff will follow up with answers to your questions.
I'll just clarify, there's no public hearing scheduled for that first hybrid meeting between city council and planning commission on the 20th.
Okay. Thank you. And I have not seen anything coming before the planning commission regarding that parcel, so I don't have any knowledge of anything in that regard. All right, so I'll hold your card for the sensitive land as well. Any other cards that were here? Any other people like to talk on general public comment? All right. Do we have anyone online that wants to speak during general public comment? Okay, hearing none, then we will close the general public comment portion of the meeting and move on to the business items. The only business item on the agenda tonight is project ZTA 19001, a public hearing to receive comments and take possible action on a proposed ordinance update relating to the sensitive lands evaluation and development standards, SLEDS ordinance, section 19.72 of the zoning ordinance. We'll hear from staff on this item, and then we'll open it up for public comment.
Thank you, commissioners. I'll give a brief update on the status of this project. We had a pretty good discussion about where things are at during the work session, but for the benefit of those who may be just joining us either in person or online, give a quick review of what we're discussing tonight. Say amendment to our zoning ordinance, the chapters, the sensitive lands. Sensitive lands meaning areas of the city that have potential hazards, things like earthquakes, landslides, flood zones. If you're near a river or a fault line, those are the areas that we're talking about. The city currently has a chapter in the zoning ordinance that regulates these developments in those areas and dictates what types of studies and analysis is required before anything can be built. We are updating that chapter. It's a full comprehensive update. We're not only updating the maps, but also going through and making amendments throughout. Just to initially, the idea was to update our maps to match the latest data that's available. We've also been updating just based on best practices as recommended by our geology consultant and UGS, Utah Geological Survey. So just a little background on what we're working on. So we've been going through this for a long time. The commission and public have given a lot of input and getting to a point now where we're pretty close to being done with this, or at least moving on to the next stage, the city council. In our last meeting, we had some good discussion and comments and feedback. We've made some edits to that, and that's what we're going over tonight. So just a quick update on what has been changed in the last month. We have made changes related to the DRC, which is the Development Review Committee. For those who are not familiar with that term, it's a group of city staff that meets regularly to review development in the city, including representatives from the planning department, engineering, And then as needed, building department, fire department, city attorney. I'm missing anyone? Generally, any staff that would be involved in reviewing a development is part of the DRC. The comments that were received indicated a preference for having this committee be responsible for making decisions rather than any single staff member. So we've added to the definition of city this line that says, for the purposes of this chapter and unless otherwise specified, all decisions, approvals, and recommendations by the city shall be made by the Development Review Committee. And then we updated the definition of DRC, Development Review Committee, to say that those members are approved by the council by resolution once each calendar year. A few other changes, non-habitable structures, things like accessory buildings that are not lived in, garages that are detached are considered non-habitable. We've removed the line stating that those structures are not required to comply with the provisions of this chapter. They still need to comply. What applies will depend on which zone they're in or which hazard is in the area. We've made changes to the steep slope section. At the recommendation of the city engineer, we revised the slope development standards section to state that no development, including all grading, retaining walls, and structures, is permitted on slope areas in excess of 30%. With exceptions for isolated slopes smaller than 2 acres in size. And that's the size of the slope itself, not necessarily the parcel or the area of disturbance or anything, but the slope itself is smaller than 2 acres. There are some exceptions. When retaining structures are permitted in steep slope areas, they're limited to 4 feet in height, not to exceed 12 feet total with terracing. We've updated the table with minimum compaction, verified that these percentages are industry standards, added the compaction percentage for landscape areas that wasn't previously included. We've made some updates to the section called building permits on lots recorded prior to the effective date of these ordinances. We added a statement to clarify that the requirements of that section are in addition to all other applicable requirements in the chapter. We removed portions that were already required elsewhere in the chapter. Reports already require, the reports have to include statements regarding suitability for development, factors of safety, and other disclosures. And then we added a requirement for a civil engineer to review all reports as well as the structural engineer. Those are the hazard areas. I'll turn time over to Sam for some riparian protection ordinances.
All right, we will run through the riparian protection area component of the ordinance. Again, we did this a little bit in our work session, but we have a great crowd tonight for the business session. So I'm going to go through the different pieces again. As just an overall introduction, this larger sensitive lands ordinance update includes a section on riparian protection or waterway protection. The general concept introduces what's referred to as a riparian protection area, which begins at a waterway's top of bank and is then split into 4 different buffer areas. Each buffer area is regulated a little bit differently with what's allowed within it in terms of development. The buffer area that's closest to the waterway is the most strict on what is allowed there, and then kind of naturally following as you move farther out from the waterway. The goals of this section in the ordinance are stated here, ranging from continuation of natural functions and habitat to recreation and aesthetic values, with some other goals included in there as well. We've had a few different iterations on our riparian protection area. We've had, I think, really helpful feedback from the commission and the public, and great consultation from a lot of experts and partners in our region. What we have for this draft before you tonight introduces a riparian protection area that's extended a little bit farther than what was previously shared. So our previous iteration proposed a protection area that extended 100 feet from top of bank. Tonight's draft proposes one that extends a little bit farther to 125 feet. Along with this extension, we've also included the introduction of a fourth buffer area. So instead of areas A, B, and C, we now have A, B, C, and D. And we've included some clarifications on how structures are regulated within these areas. So we've made the clarification in this current draft that accessory structures, which have always been allowed in area B, cannot be used for human occupancy. And then we've also made the clarification that within area C, your total structural footprint is limited to 2,000 square feet in footprint, not in cumulative stories added together. If additional square footage in footprint is desired beyond this 2,000 square feet, that would need to be located in area D or beyond the riparian protection area altogether. Finally, we updated the regulations surrounding coarse woody debris and replaced kind of a more situational disclaimer that acknowledges that the debris of this type can be largely beneficial for some riparian habitats, but may pose a hazard for others in the event of flooding. So we've removed the regulation on that and instead kind of advised homeowners to defer to riparian experts for that case-by-case basis. I did want to share a visual representation of more of the substantive changes that were made. So this is our previous boundary area. You see that it only extended to that 100 feet and it ended with area C. If we flip here, we see the current draft extends to that 125-foot mark and includes area D. I do, just for the benefit of the public or those who are tuning in for the first time, do want to run through quickly some of the specific captions here in each area. So we see that no structures are allowed in area A. We see that accessory structures are allowed in area B. However, they cannot be more than 200 square feet in footprint and they cannot be habitable. When we get to area C, we see that both accessory and primary structures are allowed. However, the total footprint coverage for all structures combined in this area is 2,000 square feet. And then when we get to area D, we see that accessory and primary structures are both still allowed with any additional square footage beyond the area C allowance needing to be located in this area to keep it farther from the waterway for both flooding hazard reasons as well as groundwater recharge. I think that brings us to the end of the riparian update. I will just share as a few housekeeping issues. Staff is recommending a recommendation of approval to be forwarded from the Planning Commission to the City Council. Any action made by the Planning Commission tonight will be a recommendation to the City Council since this is a legislative item. We do have the model motions here outlining a motion for recommendation of approval as well as a recommendation of denial. And then here we have listed the findings for our recommendation. So I'm just going to flip this maybe back to the very beginning so that it's ready if we need to go back to any slides with questions.
All right, thank you, Andy and Samantha. If we'll have some time for discussion after the public comment, but are there any commissioners do you guys want to mention anything before we open public comment? Okay, then we'll go ahead and start with, I have Woody and Will. Do you guys have a preference on order? Last time you did, so I'm asking. Okay, so we have Woody.
Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. First of all, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for what you guys are doing. Really appreciate it. The first part, what I'm going to say is kind of same thing I said on May 4th. SLEDS is a very special ordinance and it says sensitive lands evaluation and development. SLEDS is about evaluation of sensitive lands to maximize public safety for our residents and our guests, not normal land. It's also about demonstrating that Cottonwood Heights has done documented due diligence in its evaluation of public safety to avoid any liability for anything that may happen in the future. And the current SLEDS document is a pretty good baseline. In the packet, Andy took away a couple of my first comments here, and that was the creation and approval of the DRC continues with the city council. Excellent. The DRC remains the SLED's approval and decision-making entity for Cottonwood Heights. Excellent. The membership of the DRC has maintained the option, put back in, and others. So that the city council should have the option of adding members as it feels necessary. Excellent. So appreciate that very much. However, we have a concern. In the current SLEDs, there's a special procedure process to find and timely oversight and approvals of geological hazards that identify and locate hazards, evaluate and analyze. Mitigation plans are presented and approved, and each of these are approved by a documented by DRC, and special DRC is approved by city council. We already said that. The new proposal, there was the packet that was put on email on Friday afternoon. The procedure has been renumbered and renamed to a section called preliminary activities. The naming changes the section to a list of activities and it is not a procedure to do a thorough evaluation of sensitive lands. And anyway, evaluation needs to be defined as a precise and documented series of steps to ensure public safety and legal due diligence for any definable building area. The proposed change is not acceptable. It wasn't mentioned, but in the riparian section, there's a tremendous detail about the DRC involvement, role, and specifically defined. Glad to see that. The last comment, we're glad to see that it stayed in there. I'm not going to read it because of time, but anyway, that all SLEDS items must be done, completed, and approved before any development is presented to the Planning Commission. So all the mitigation issues are done and the buildable area is known. One last comment. I still encourage you guys to consider the process development diagram. It's a fantastic way of managing and communicating to everybody, including residents, developers, etc. And I hope some of the questions we gave you before are valuable. We thank you for your effort, your time. And thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Woody.
You bet.
Did you get the last name on there? Okay. All right, Will McCarville.
A tough day. I'm Will McCarville. I live at 3607 Golden Hills Avenue, Cottonwood Heights. The new revision is much improved. The definition of DRC now includes a recital of its authority to review, recommend, and approve. I also very much like the riparian zone section, as it specifically shows where the DRC is involved. It also has clear processes. I wish the geological hazard section would also be as thorough, pointing out where the DRC involvements occur. Seems like it making it similar to the riparian zone section in terms of format and how it reads would make sense. The geological hazard section lacks this sense of process and procedure. One section is called preliminary activities, but it doesn't seem to kind of tie to the other section. In building a house, one would like the basement to be built first before the walls. One would like the walls to be built first before the roof. Otherwise, the process is inefficient, costly, and downright dangerous. Our SLEDS ordinance needs to be specific as to the order steps are taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Next, we have Mike Young.
Hello, I'm Mike Young in the Old Mill Estates. I'm on the board of the Homeowners Association. And the work session was very informative, and applaud you for all your efforts to protect these lands that are so important in Cottonwood Heights. I recently attended a meeting where Alan Matheson, who's the executive director of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, outlined what the state of Utah was doing for that amazing parcel of land at the point of the mountain. Granted, the state owns the land, so they've got some ability that the city doesn't have with private property. But it was amazing to see what type of activity they were doing, an almost unique opportunity in the United States to make sure that that property is developed as an amazing center of life, city, commerce, et cetera. The Big Cottonwood Canyon Creek area is a river drainage, as we all know. And as Ed has indicated previously, it's a very unusual location in Cottonwood Heights, perhaps akin to the amazing parcel at Point of the Mountain. And we have an opportunity as a city to make sure that we protect the stream and the adjacent land as you've discussed with the efforts in the protected area. But in addition, and as important, is overall protection by whatever means the city has to make sure that area retains its character. It's a river drainage, and the development that goes on there needs to be compatible not only with the existing activity that goes on, but also with future compatibility, so that there is a whole at the end that the city can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, we have Rick Stevenson.
Thank you. Rick Stevenson, 3393 Canyon Creek Drive. My wife Rhonda and I have lived there for 2 years. We love it there. Neighbors of Ed. We echo his feelings about the historical, which doesn't involve what the issue is, but we echo that. But the historical Big Cottonwood Canyon Road paralleling the trail with the markers. Really cool to walk there and see that. What I'm focused on, though, is the riparian issue. And I compliment you for extending zone D to that 120, 125. I think it's prudent. I just want to speak to why I think that's a wise move and why it bears consideration. Two issues involving the riparian zone, I think, which you mentioned, flooding and also the habitat. So the habitat's very interesting. I'll send the commissioners pictures of the wildlife we've seen. My wife said, don't include the raccoons, the squirrels, and the coyotes, so I'll keep it out of there. But there's some really cool shots about wildlife on our property, even to the point where my birdwatcher friend claims that a picture of an owl that I took is actually a Mexican spotted owl, which is endangered. It's a little fuzzy, but he swears that's it. But so that, that's important. The flooding issue, well, back to habitat. According to Salt Lake County, less than 1% of land in Utah is designated as riparian. And of that, 82% of all the bird species depend on that. So I don't know if that means they're wiped out as those areas recede, but very critical there. The flooding is an issue. I think when our insurance company reviewed our house, they said no floodplain, and all the data backed that up. Recently, I've noticed that according to its FEMA zone where we live, and that would be Ed, and that would be Eva's, we're all along the stream there. Where we live, it was designated in the past 3 out of 10. It's now 9 out of 10. And what that means is, in the next 30 years, 9 out of 10 chances of experiencing flooding at our house. I think our home, given the banks of the stream, it fluctuates a little bit as we know, probably less than 50 feet. So of course we're grandfathered, and of course we're not going to move our home, our foundation, but future building, were it in that zone, I think would be in danger for sure. So again, the 125 setback. I'm also speaking for Lonnie and Shannon Paulos. So if you just let me have an extra minute, if I may.
Just a couple more comments.
Okay. I was going to read the issue on what the county says, but erosion and flood protection, extensive root systems of repairing shrubs and trees, stabilize streamback soils. So flooding would be mitigated by that. It allows the stream system to absorb floodwaters, dissipating their destructive energy, high waters overflowing out of the channel onto the floodplain. Food and shelter for the habitat, as we discussed, but again, tagging onto that, I think that's a good issue. So we appreciate the commission staff.
Thank you, Rick. Deborah Bush.
Hi, I'm Deborah Bush, and I'm here to represent the Henry Grow a historical a family association, and we would like to see this area preserved from a historic point of view because this has been a special area, and in addition to being historical, it's also a very beautiful natural area. So I just might like to make a passionate plea from all of us who enjoy biking and hiking. And I think having a small park-like setting in the middle of Cottonwood Heights is a real asset to all of us. And not only that, but history is going to be lost if it's covered up with too much, if it's covered up with too many buildings, and especially now that I'm hearing about the possibility of extra flooding. When we bring in more housing, we also make it more difficult for nature to take its own personal course. And so I would appeal to us all to think in terms of preserving the icon of the old mill and its surrounding area, and not making this a large, wide road where bikers can no longer feel safe to ride down the road, and where it's filled to capacity with exhaust from cars, and keep it kind of more like a park setting. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I haven't really prepared a lot, but I just have a passion in my heart for this area. I love it. My husband is a descendant of Henry Grow, and our president is a famous lawyer back east, and he'd be glad to work with the commission if they would be interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah. Chris Cowley.
My name is Chris Cowley. My wife and I live at 6985 Canyon Creek Circle, and we've been there approximately 20 years. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the Planning Commission. And I applaud the proposed riparian protection that has been proposed for the sleds document. I would encourage you to maybe even consider moving that area A back another 25 feet to make it 50 feet and move everything else back another 25 feet. That area, as has been mentioned by many people, is a fairly beautiful, wild area. It's the last open area in the valley of Big Cottonwood Creek. And the last 2 years that we've experienced, all of us, with COVID and the isolation that many people have felt, one of the things that has been a savior for many people is the ability to be outside and on that pathway. And I've met people from Old Mill Estates, my neighborhood, and from Hidden Mill Cove just north of us that are on the pathway. But I've also seen many, many people that utilize that path that are not in our immediate neighborhood. They're Cottonwood Heights citizens, perhaps, I don't know, but they come and they use that pathway. And we have an opportunity to really make something a little special in that area, in the bottom of the drainage on the east side of the creek. If we have a little bit more of a riparian protected area, we could extend some walking paths in that area, maybe even make a little picnic area with some benches and tables. But it's an area that's utilized and it provides benefit to the community. And I would encourage the Planning Commission to consider maybe even extending the riparian protection of that zone A back another 25 feet. But the proposed riparian protection is a great improvement, and I applaud the consideration that the Planning Commission is giving to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Ed? Mosick?
Very well done. Thank you. It's a good shot. I echo Chris's feelings, and most of my concerns were laid in the work meeting. If you could move it back to 125 feet, I'd be happy with it. Further the better, but that's a very good start. And as Chris said, if we could move it maybe back another 25 feet with all 4 zones, that would probably be ideal. Thanks again for the opportunity and for all the hard work you guys are doing. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, those are all the cards that I have. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on this item? Go ahead. Just state your name clearly so we get it on the record.
Good evening. My name is Dave Clark. I, along with Mike, I'm on the Old Mill Estates Homeowners Association. I'm the president of the association. And on behalf of the residents of our neighborhood, we just want to thank you for the efforts you've gone through and the stewardship that you have over all areas of our city, and for the keeping our best interests at heart in protecting those lands. As has been mentioned, the creek area in that valley is so unique in the state that it really needs to have special consideration for any future developments or any of that. And the riparian section that you put together, I think, really helps in the protection of that area. You know, I've lived in the Old Mill Estates for 25 years, and the thing that drew me to that area is the rural nature in amongst the city that has been growing and developing, and we've been able to keep the area pretty rural. And I just would like to stress the importance of doing that. Someone mentioned the historic nature of the old mill, and it's on the historic register, and I really feel strongly that making the Big Cottonwood Canyon Road that goes right next to the old mill, if it were able to be made a historic roadway, that would go a long way to help kind of keep our area, the feel of the area the way it has been. I was out the other day and stopped when I saw someone digging a trench, and I thought I'd stop and find out what the trenches were for. And I went up to the tractor, and I'll be darned, it was Doug Shelby on the tractor and digging a trench. And I talked to him for a long time and asked him what possibly could, what he doing. And he said, they were doing seismic studies for future master plans. And I understand that they will develop as best they can. And, I think the Walker family should be heralded for the contributions that they've made. And I would love nothing more to see the Walker family park across the street from the old mill. But I just want to say thank you to the commission, and the work that you've done and the staff, and appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Dave. All right, I saw another hand at the back.
I just counted my steps. Thank you my name is Tom Etzel. I'm in the Old Mill Estate area, and thank you for doing the work that you've done and the numbers you've come up with on the riparian. I think that's great. Expanding it is wonderful. And I, again, would echo, think about making it a little larger. Because for those that can't really kind of get spatial recognition, I think this room is approximately 50 feet. I mean, each of these sections are maybe 12 feet apart. That's what 50 feet is. It's not that much. So I really kind of think of it when you go down there by the creek, you kind of look at it and what 50 feet really is. And I would suggest make it as big as you possibly can. And I agree with all the things that people have said about the historical nature. And when you're in this room making decisions, take a look back at the picture over there of the old mill and how it looks there. And that's how we'd like to try to keep it. You know, it's not like that now because there's chain link fence and other things. But keep in mind when you're sitting in here and look at that picture and just kind of think what that could be like in that area. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right, any other public comment on this item? Anyone online that would like to give public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands or anyone online. Is there any discussion from the commission regarding public comment? If we want to close it or leave it open, I'd like a motion if one way or the other.
Well, I appreciate the comments, and it always gives me pause, and just on the whole ordinance, and I'm grateful as well for the improvements we've made on process and the definitions. I feel like with each iteration, we continue to progress towards something that's more and more workable. I heard some comments I would love for us to kind of, continue to massage, and I'm not sure how realistic some of those things are. I'd love for staff to have the opportunity to digest it a little bit. I feel like we're really, really close, like closer than we've been personally. I might propose that we wait just a little bit. I also, and the pros and cons of this, we have 2 new commissioners that were approved last night by the city council that haven't had a chance to kind of eyeball this, but we'll deal with the implications for it after it's passed on to the city council. They won't get another bite at the apple. And I don't know if that should be the only consideration, but those 2 things stuck in my mind, Chair, as at least possible reasons to consider waiting just one more meeting just to make sure that we're there. And I appreciate the discussion about, could we add 25 more feet reasonably? And just a chance for us to just see if there's any precedent for that. I realize that we need to make sure that we've got some standing in making that argument, but anyway, those are my thoughts.
And I echo what you're saying, and I think that taking a look at the extra 25 feet, and before I start in on my comments, too, want to thank everyone for your time and your input. It's very valuable. And so, but I think looking at that, and we are so close, as indicated by how few questions I probably had, but in this ordinance, I think it's great. I think it's going to be very, very helpful. And it may be an opportunity to wait. I mean, and not to belabor it too much longer, because I do really feel like it needs to go before the city council and have them the opportunity to review it as well.
Commissioner Ebler, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my first thought on this is that I echo the comments. I think we're pretty close, and I was going back and forth during the work session and even listening to the comments on what my comfort level was in taking a vote tonight. But one of the things that kind of struck me just generally is I'd really like a chance for Commissioner Chapel to be here. Just in terms of she has incredible expertise in this specific field. And so like, I think her input one way or the other, I would feel more comfortable informing my vote if I had that part of, the body here for the legislative or for the deliberative process to be a little bit more complete. And, and of course, like I was empathizing if I was coming onto the commission and they just voted on a major piece of legislation that, or a major statute that I would then be held to in, interpreting or whatever else, I would have wanted to be part of the process potentially. So it's always one of those things of erring on the side of caution. So I'm okay, like, just taking a pause on this, but I mean, most of my questions have been answered and it's really just kind of ensuring that all voices are heard at this point.
It seems like the public comments are, for the most part, either resolved or we're hearing kind of repeat comments, things that we've heard before. I think we could continue this item and we wouldn't necessarily need to leave public comment open for another meeting. I'm okay either way. I just want.
I mean, generally, the public has the ability to comment on any issue, regardless in the meeting. So, whether
they
it's
could
specifically on the record or not.
Right.
And the other thing is if there are voices that haven't been heard as part of the deliberative process that we've engaged over the last few months, certainly anyone can send in a comment directly to city staff and it'll get entered into the record for our consideration between this meeting and when a vote's eventually taken.
So if we continued the item, it would continue to the first week in August because
August 3rd.
Yeah.
We need a motion to
I would like a motion whichever action we just decide.
Do you want to chair? Would you like to have a motion on the public comment first, or on the action itself?
Let's deal with public comment and then we'll deal with the action.
a motion to close public comment on project ZTA -19-001.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Henderson?
Yes.
Well, there's discussion first.
Oh, discussion.
Yeah. I think the only reason I said that is like the only thing I would say as part of this vote is again, there's still the ability and mechanisms to get comments into the public record. And I would just encourage anyone who actually has information to share or an opinion to share to just submit the written comments to city staff and we'll read them.
I concur.
Okay.
Call the question?
Yep. Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Ebler,
Aye.
Commissioner Allen, yes. So we've closed the public comment on item ZTA 19-001. Now on to a motion for the item itself.
I move that we continue item project ZTA -19-001 to date certain August 3rd Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Ebler,
Aye.
Commissioner Allen, yes. So we've continued this item to August 3rd. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and public comment on this. And I guess the only last thing on our agenda tonight is to approve meeting minutes. So that's always exciting.
Chair, can I clarify? There's one of these sets of minutes have been on here for a long time. Commissioners can vote on minutes even if they weren't at the meeting, if they generally look good. Staff's been here, we think they're good. But we would like to close the book on some of these old minutes if possible.
Okay, then let's,
Move
Look
to
at
approve minutes.
the first one is the approval of planning commission meeting minutes from April 6th, 2022.
Move to approve the minutes from April 6th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No, I think we can do a group vote on this one.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, what about so now we have approval of the planning commission minutes from June 1st, 2022.
Move to approve the minutes from June 1st, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. All right, then that concludes our meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.